straight to Chris Jericho. So Chris Jericho, all I've written actually in my notes is Chris Jericho and the Undisputed Title. And I thought, just insert rant here, basically. So I just thought the whole way they did everything. I mean, you could pretty much say the whole of the summer 2001 was pretty shockingly booked in many ways. And I do think the Steve Austin, not to go too far back away from WrestleMania 18, but the Steve Austin turn invasion is probably right up there with one of the worst booking decisions they've ever made in terms of really kind of killing. I see that as the end of the Attitude Era at that moment. But anyway, fast forward, you get to Survivor Series. All the invasion's kind of done. You've got two world champions, and they just seem to be in such a rush to resolve that. So instead of leading this through to, there's all sorts of ways you could have done it. You could have had, the Rumble challenger challenges for one title at the February pay-per-view, and then they get the titles together in March at WrestleMania. All sorts of ways of doing it. What you end up doing is this really unsatisfactory ending to the December pay-per-view of Jericho, where he kind of wins in a really screwy fashion, and then they don't really push him, and it's Steve Austin 1 month and The Rock another month, I think, in terms of fences, or maybe Triple H I can't remember, anyway, whatever. The Rumble and the February defense are screwy as well. Then you get all the way through to WrestleMania, you've got this terrible feud with Triple H about their dog and all this sort of nonsense, and it's like how did this do anyone any good? Like, in their minds we're thinking, we're pushing Jericho to the moon here, and we've got this new star and we've given him a chance and stuff. I just think the whole way this was booked was really dreadful. And I thought then, and I still think now, that this probably should have been some combination. I thought Steve Austin had to be in this main event in the championship match, and this is where they should have unified it. And in the end, I remember being in Skydome and looking up to the top deck about 2 or 3 minutes into this match, and people were filing out because this Canadian, though he wasn't from Toronto, he's from Winnipeg, they just didn't give a shit about him at all. And this is a bit of a theme for Canadians on this show. So the crowd was into stuff that they during the course of this night, but for this it was such a miss. And then after all this build up for Triple H's comeback, they take the title off in the following month. So I just thought the whole thing around the Undisputed Title, from that December pay-per-view, from the setup to that all the way through to this, was dreadful, and the main event was such a miss as well.
I agree. I mean, I think I was looking at just on the visual of the match itself, and I was like, Triple H is humongous. He's probably bigger than he's ever been at this point. He's absolutely massive.
And tan.
That was the next thing I was going to say. He's orange. I mean, he's so tanned. It's unbelievable. And then you look at Jericho and he looks like a little boy in comparison. Yeah. You're like, there is no chance. There just doesn't, you can't hold Jericho up as a legitimate threat to Triple H in any way during this match. You just kind of instantly like, well, it just doesn't do anything from just a visual perspective. Then couple that, Stephen, with what you were saying about the way his title run went, which was just, he was basically treated as sort of fifth tier. Above him, Austin, Rock, Triple H, Undertaker, and Hogan, and the NWO all coming in. Jericho was just a complete afterthought. The feud with him was really about Triple H and Stephanie, not Triple H and Chris Jericho. He just had no chance at all to look like a threat to Triple H. So that was a huge part of this. Then on top of that, I think Triple H's ego gets in the way. So he's the kind of person, much like we find at WrestleMania 25, I think we'll find, where a match requires a load of shortcuts, a load of distractions, something to get people up out of their seats because they're quite exhausted by the time they get to this match. He won't do it. He just turns into, I must be this wrestling machine because that's who I am, and I'm good enough to carry the show to a satisfactory ending just being a wrestler. And it doesn't work at all. The fans aren't interested. They're quiet. And as you say, they file out very quickly after the main event. The post-match kind of celebration lasts a minute, two. Like, it's very, very short indeed. Compare that to like previous WrestleManias. I think at WrestleMania 17, Austin and Vince McMahon as heels are in the ring for like 7-8 minutes after the match. It's just got no reaction whatsoever. I like the idea, to be honest, of having the two belts come together at WrestleMania 18. That would have made a lot more sense to me. And to be honest, just chuck The Rock and Austin back in there in the main event against one another again, with them having the two belts. I know they'd already done 3-4 matches by this point, but it's Austin and The Rock, right? I mean, how many people are going to be upset you've gone back to that? I mean, really? I mean, and keep Austin as a heel. Keep him as a heel until...
Well, you could do that versus Triple H, couldn't you? Easily. You could have easily done that, or keep him tweener or something, and have him win the thing. But like you said, Ben, you touched on it. This is really part one of the Triple H WrestleMania main event graveyard, and there'd be lots of ghouls and horrors still to come after this. And it's exactly nailed on what you said in terms of his attitude. Interesting enough, you talk about the celebration, Ben. It was so this one and 25 coming out is the everyone's really downbeat, got out of Skydome, freezing rain, everyone's trudging along, like hoods pulled up, and just think everyone was really downbeat because of this match, and it was just such a miss and such a kind of sign of things to come with this company that just started getting more things wrong than they got right after sort of the 2001 kind of peak finished, really.
Matt, what was your thoughts?
What a difference a year makes. I think considering this was the last sort of WWF WrestleMania as well, this was really something the point was really hammered home at how bad this main event was. And I tell you what I want to do very quickly, actually. I want to actually give a shout out to Drowning Pool for actually saving us from having to see a full on-screen video of the Triple H and Chris Jericho feud, because as we've said already, it sucked. It was really bad. And, because we didn't get to see the actual sort of, video on screen, that, again, it was during the Drowning Pool performance, we didn't get to see the things to do with, Jericho walking Stephanie's dog and that type of stuff. So thank you, Drowning Pool, for saving us from that. It was very much appreciated. This was Triple H versus Stephanie. It had nothing. Chris Jericho was a complete afterthought, which is just an absolute crying shame considering how talented the guy is and was at the time as well. Now, it was so bad. I will say that I do think that having Triple H win the title was the right thing to do. Coming back from his injury, the reception he got at Madison Square Garden was amazing. The Royal Rumble was pretty much built surrounding his return and did big business. So Triple H winning the title, all four, I think that was the right thing to do. But yeah, but both of you guys pretty much said it there then, is that this was the Triple H ego on show at its finest, where you was thinking, my God, we need that 20, 30-minute wrestling classic in the main event, the good guy overcoming the struggles to win the title, and it just didn't work. It does happen. It happens again. Triple H does it a couple of times over the next decade, and it just goes to show that he's not always, the big brains that everybody thinks he is. But, looking at the match quality, it was fine, which, is definitely not what you want for the main event of WrestleMania, but it was just really misplaced, and you could tell that the crowd they did care about Triple H versus Stephanie. Say what you will about it, they did care about those two, because when Triple H got the pedigree on Stephanie, they did go, I don't want to say they went nuts for it, but they certainly popped for it, and it was the loudest thing in the match. Compare that to, there was a near fall where Jericho hit the lion salt on Triple H after, I think it was the backdrop through the table, which should have been a fairly heated near fall. Nothing. Crickets. Not a damn thing from that. And yeah, it just summed up the match. Nobody cared. Again, I'll give another shout out, JR. God bless the man. He tried. He really, really tried. I do love when he said the call at the end, all the other superstars, are you ready to play the game? I just thought, oh, great call. But I just didn't really buy into it. And as Stephen said, what a shame this title reign went, because he dropped the fucking thing the next month.
Matt, you just reminded me of something that I've forgotten, and it's just popped back into my mind. It got a lovely groan from whatever there would have been left. So after the cameras were off, and obviously around this time, am I right in thinking by this time Triple H and Stephanie were a thing back? Yeah, they were, because they got married the following year, weren't they? Yeah. So we're already quite a bit beyond the Triple H has got Vince McMahon's ear and all that sort of stuff. And I remember on Canadian television that day, there was an interview that's still out there somewhere. You can find it on YouTube with Triple H and Michael Landsberg, where Triple H is just such a dick, and he's slagging off Jericho and slagging off everything. It's just comes off as just a bit of an arsehole. Anyway, he got on the house mic and said, "This is a message for all the boys in the back. It's time to play the game." And literally all you could hear was ugh. From literally the Skydome crowd just groaned. This dickhead guy. So yeah, that's one of the last things I heard as I was coming out. But you reminded me of that with the Jim Ross call.
In terms of him dropping the belt a month later, I think that was probably a bit to do with Triple H realizing this had been a flop and exorcising himself from it straight away as soon as he possibly could. I think they saw the Hogan pop, and probably between Vince and Triple H and others, they kind of went, oh well, maybe we should give him a nostalgia thing. And Triple H probably encouraged it, because he was like, well, you know what? I can put Hogan over. It makes me look quite good because I put him over. No one can be upset with me about it. But also, Hogan's no threat to my position, really. He's going to be a temporary thing, this nostalgia thing. In the meantime, I can then get out of this title picture and eventually turn heel again, because it's been a complete flop. And you're right, Matt. At Madison Square Garden, he got a huge reaction on his return. It was thunderous. But it never approached that again. It just never got close to that again, because he's not supposed to be a babyface, or at least at this point, he definitely wasn't supposed to be a babyface. There was no stock in it at all, I don't think. And I always hate this, and I really criticized WWE when Seth Rollins came back from his injury and people wanted him to be babyface straight away because he'd just come back from a big injury. And I was like, yeah, but in the canon of WWE, what's he done to make him a babyface? He's still a heel. The story that has been told prior to this is that he's a heel and a suck up to the authority. With this, Triple H had been a heel before he got injured. Regardless of what he did to finish that match back on Raw, the tag team match, that's not part of the canon. That's not part of your on-screen story. He is a bad guy. When he comes back, if you want him to be a babyface, he has to do something heroic, and he didn't. He just came back, and then people were expected to cheer for him. So they had no reason to really get behind him beyond that initial return, and I think that's a major failing of this. It's one of those really poor WrestleMania main events, and I think also another part of Triple H's ego probably was I don't know, we'll probably talk about this later on, but the position of the match, should it have been last? Should it have come before Hogan and The Rock, for example? In terms of if they had done, I would imagine, again, Triple H's ego shining through, going, well, I want the main event, I won the Royal Rumble, I'm the babyface going in to win the championship, so I should be on top. I can only assume that would probably be something that he would be pushing for as well.
I think as soon as the finish to Hogan Rock was what it was with regards to the aftermath, so Hogan turning babyface essentially, I think that's got to go on last. So as soon as you're in that place, that has to go on last, I think. And I think it would now. I think they've learnt their lesson somewhat from this. With The Rock and Cena at 28, that went on last. I think they would for something like this again now.
Do you know what? I think had they known that Hogan was going to get the reaction that he did, then yes, it should have gone on last. But if they were expecting him to get, the heel reception, then no, I actually agree with the Triple H Jericho match going on last.
Well, I think they knew, because it's difficult, because what Hulk Hogan says and puts out there, you can't necessarily take as being believed. But my understanding from reading things around this time was that all week the reactions to Hogan in the city were huge. Reaction at Axis was huge, and that there is a rumor out there. I think Hogan might say this in his book, whether it's true or not, that he flew down to Florida to get his red and yellow gear, but then they decided not to go with that, and he came out in his NWO stuff. Now, do I believe that or not? Is that one step too far? But I think going into this night, they kind of knew in Canada that at the very least it was going to be 50-50 or 60-40 for Hogan rather than 90-10 or whatever it was you got. So at some point they're making the call, because obviously they didn't call that in the ring to have the NWO attack him. That call has been made at some point that weekend, and that's the call where you say, right, this is last now. But yeah, they didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean they knew that he was going to get the reaction, I think, because otherwise they wouldn't have booked the babyface turn, but they'd have just left it as it was. Now, going back to this match, one more thing I want to talk about. Matt, you talked about Jericho and how much of a shame it was that he didn't get the focus that he should have got. I just think they shouldn't have put the belt on him. I don't think he was ready for the belt. I don't think he was not in the same league of the star as Austin and The Rock and Triple H. He just wasn't there, and he shouldn't have been, in my opinion, occupying that space at that time. Maybe if Jericho had been champion after WrestleMania at some point through the summer, kind of establish himself as a main event there, where you don't have to protect Austin and Rock and Triple H quite so much, it might have worked. But I just don't think at that point he was in the right place. And he's a talented guy, but I just don't think he was a star of the level that he needed to be going into WrestleMania to be champion. I just don't think he was there. Admittedly, the reign they gave him, the storyline that took place, didn't help him get there. But I think you've got to almost be there before you get the belt. If you're going into WrestleMania, you've got to almost be there already. And he just wasn't. So I just don't think they should have given him the belt in the first place. And, for me, that kind of is summed up by the fact that his wins at Vengeance against The Rock and Austin, that he loves to brag about, beating both of them in one night, are terrible matches. Both of them. They're just not good matches. And, I think this is a criticism I've leveled at Chris Jericho before. It's why he was my figure of hate in 2021. In our first year of this podcast. He crumbles on the big stage. He chokes, in my view. He's not got it. When it comes to the really big stage, he just doesn't turn up. If he's sort of fourth or fifth from the top, he's fine. If he's in a lower level pay-per-view, he's okay. But when it comes to the really big matches where it really matters for him, it really counts for his career, he chokes.
I think as well that it wasn't just that he got the WWF title. This was, I remember seeing the video packages and the video things they put together for this Vengeance thing. And I didn't like what they were doing, but this was a big deal. Like unifying the WCW World Title and the WWF title was a huge thing that they just needed to take a breath, and just WWF took the opposite. Like, right, we're chucking this all out, chuck it all out. We need to unify the titles, and this could have been, one undisputed unified world champion. This is the first time they'd done this in North America. So this could have been a huge way to end WrestleMania. And I think what you said, Ben, is really interesting. I never really thought about that, about a heel coming back as a babyface. You naturally get the pop, but the character's not really changed. And I think that if you want them to become a babyface, you put them in scenarios scenarios where they can kind of keep their character the same, but they're just going after someone that makes them a babyface. If that makes sense. So with that situation, if Steve Austin has stayed heel, which you can argue he probably never should have been heel in the first place, but if you've done the damage at that point, then why don't you could have him as a tweet. You could easily have him a tweener. So he's just again anti everyone. He's fallen out of everyone. He's not on either side because he's out of the alliance, etc. Some people cheer him, some people boo him, whatever. And then Triple H comes back in because they've got the thing with the tag team stuff when Triple H was originally injured, and that's the WrestleMania match. But they just felt like they wanted to make Jericho, but they didn't go the whole way with him, and he wasn't the right person at the right time.
They were desperate to get away from the invasion, right? That's why they unified the titles really quickly. So like, we got to get away from this. It's not worked. We just need to knock it on the head. But I think that in retrospect, that was a mistake in terms of the night after Survivor Series. They basically reset everything. Austin went back to being a babyface. Angle went back to being a heel properly. Flair came out. The new kind of ownership structure was kind of revealed to everybody, and we're off to the races. Austin should have stayed heel because regardless of the damage being done, and you're right, he should never have gone. And we spoke about this on WrestleMania 17. He should never, on that show, should never have gone heel in the first place. But having done it, may as well stick with it now because he's not going to be able to hit the same heights of popularity he did before he was a heel. And what's more, if WCW hadn't been gotten rid of the Survivor Series, and in fact maybe they'd even won that match, Triple H could have been the guy that comes back to lead the re-invasion of the WWE, if you see what I mean, from the WWE's perspective and Vince McMahon's perspective, and that would have made him a hero, someone to get behind. And they could have done it in lots of other ways. My point is, and you said it, they have to give you a reason to cheer for him beyond just that he's returned, and they didn't do that. And wrestling does this a lot. It expects you to cheer for people who were heels just because other heels have turned on them, and like that doesn't make them likable. It makes them a loser, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
like they've got to do something that makes them heroic in some way, or makes you want to root for them. The thing that sticks in my mind a lot about The Rock, when in mid '98 there was this episode of Raw, it was really strange. It was The Undertaker and Kane basically came out for practically every match and beat everybody up in every match. I think it was just after SummerSlam when they've been revealed to properly be in cahoots, if you like. And there was no big matches on it. It was just all kind of like mid-card matches. And Undertaker and Kane just came out, beat everybody up. And there was one match where they came out and attacked D'Lo Brown, who was in the Nation, and somebody else. And D'Lo was cornered by both Undertaker and Kane. And The Rock ran out to save D'Lo Brown. And D'Lo Brown kind of slinked off and ran away. And The Rock got beaten up for it. But it was that moment when people went, I really like The Rock. It was because it was heroic. It was like he stood up for one of his guys and he took the beating for him, basically. And it was like, oh, actually, this guy's really great. I love him. And instantly after that, he just became a superstar. And that's such a good way of turning someone without actually explicitly turning them. And I think it's been lost. It's like almost like, again, it's one of these sort of official wrestling designations. I go on about this a lot and I find it hard to articulate. But these days, people tend to be in these kind of myopic feuds with people, almost like an official designation of being in this feud. Same goes for babyface and heel. There's almost like this, oh, well, the wrestling rule is you have to have a turn, an official turn, in order to turn. And you don't need that. You just need something to make a crumb of something to make people like someone. Suddenly then they become popular and you can build on that. So for example, I was thinking about this when we were talking about Steve Austin's heel turn. He was officially revealed as a heel at the end of WrestleMania 17, but actually he turned heel in the story prior to that because at some point he had to arrange with Vince that this was going to happen. And so again, it's that kind of thing where when did he actually turn heel in the story? Forget like the official kind of reveal of it. And it's that kind of concept I think isn't well gotten. And I think this is the problem with the Triple H thing. It's just there was no thing that made you like him. It was just, oh, he's returned, so he's a babyface. That's the official designation now. It shouldn't have been like that. It should have been he's returned and done something that makes him heroic or likable in the eyes of the audience.